this is a very visual session, I believe, as in videos and all of that sort of modern technology thing.
Hand puppets, yeah. Everything.
So do make sure you pay attention, because you might miss something very important, that flashes past in front of your eyes. So thank you very much, George, and enjoy the however many minutes you've got to entertain us with. Thank you.
Yes, I have about 30 pages of notes, so I hope you're ready for a good one. This is going to be a Pentecostal meeting. Yes, now throw your money at me. I'm poor. At least that's what you think about all these pastors. Why do they always keep asking for money? So, first things first, who am I? You know who Pete is, but who am I? I'm just another white, guy from, obviously not here, but from the States originally. My wife is actually British, from here, from Devon, not from here. She was not born in the Hayes Center. But she is from here. She's a human rights barrister. That's kind of what we do. We help people, and so that's ironic that I was just saying it's really pornographic. But you're still going to have to come and find out why. So more check marks. Go ahead and feel free to move about if you want to go and add your name to that list right now. I'm very much a narcissist, so I just want to make that known. So I want you to make me feel good about myself while I'm up here, right? So, yes, so my name is George Elerick. So yes, I basically am a filmmaker, social rights activist, and that's really the long and short of it, and I live and breathe right now, so that's pretty much the context of this conversation. So, Pete has been talking about some very, very interesting things, and the importance of doubt, the importance of also understanding our place in the world. And so I kind of wanted to basically continue on from that. And the way I want to do this is I'm going to preface this talk, and I noticed that Pete does that as well. We have that in common. So this is going to be like a preface of a preface. And first things first, I'm bored of the stage. One, two, mainly because this is patriarchy, but just in wood, right? I mean, this is just a symbol of what it is. Hey, I'm the one person that has all the answers, and I hold the ultimate truth, and I am God incarnate, right? I hate that. I'm not, right? So just to dispel any rumors, I'm not going to sign God or anything like that. But I want to get away from that model, this kind of hierarchical ideology that is so prevalent in the West and has permeated via globalization across the world. Especially and predominantly in churches and in white Western demographics. And so that's preface one. That's why I'm down here. I'm amongst the common people, right? Yes. I'm dressed like one of you. I still have clothes on, right? So the other thing is that I'm not here to offer you truth. I don't believe truth, capital T, exists, and there we go. Everybody leaves the room. But my basis for this argument comes from a rabbinic midrash. So midrash is just another word for commentary that comes out of the story of Jacob and the angel, right? Jacob wrestling the angel. It's like the first MMA event, right, of history, okay? Mixed martial arts for those who don't know, right? And you have Jacob, who basically is wrestling with the angel, who could be God, couldn't be God. It's almost as if God is in crisis, right? And that's what this whole event is about, God in crisis, right? And so what we have is this moment where, Jacob ends up saying, I'm not going to give up, right? I'm here till the end. And so the angel of God, someone gives up, right? Someone metaphysical gives up. It's as if the metaphysical collapses, and all we have is reality in the here and now, right? And to me, that's exactly what the story is arguing, right? All we have is the here and now, right? This kind of metaphysical God up there that makes us feel good about ourselves, right? And is ultimately a drug for our own existence, is something that Jacob comes to realize, actually, you know what? You don't exist, right? Now, before we get into that argument of whether that kind of God exists or not, the whole point of that is that rabbis read that story as basically a specific wrestling between the person, i.e. anybody, Jacob was the everyman, and then also with truth, right? Our direct wrestling with truth. And so for me, I believe that we encounter truth through the dialectic, right? There's this, there's one idea, and then there's an opposing idea, and then we wrestle it out, and there's this possibility that by the end of this, all of us might encounter an iota of truth, and we might be changed by it. Because remember, Jacob walked away with a new walk and a new name. Now, if you're a cross-dressing fashion guru, that might be you, and you might not even need to wrestle with God because you just walk around stage with a new walk and a new name, right? That's all you need to do. But the whole point of this is that I need you to not just agree with me. I need you to disagree with me. I need you to disagree with everyone here, right? Not just for the sake of it. This isn't like some, hey, fight club and we're just going to blood it out, right? But if you actually disagree, voice it. So this talk isn't some sort of systematic, you're going to listen to me and then we're going to have a Q&R. Notice that they haven't put it on there as a Q&R. We're not going to say that that was an administrative error, but yeah, so basically that's the point of this, right? I'm not here to give you truth. You're not here to give me truth. But in this wrestling together, maybe we'll actually walk out of here with a new way to see ourselves and one another, right? Okay. And I'm expecting way more interaction than that. All right, so what I want to talk about are institutional biases today, right? Those pesky little things that keep showing up. You know, Pete talks about that, repressing. But I want to deal with it more on a sociological level, right? I want to deal with racism, and I want to deal with anti-feminism, homophobia, xenophobia, which is the overarching umbrella, Islamophobia. So we might get really down and dirty because I was there at the talk last night, and questions were coming up about ISIS and other very, very interesting current events. And so, please bring your gloves and get ready to fight. Because fighting is good, right? I mean, basically, everybody has to walk in here as enemies so that we have an opportunity to love one another, right? Because if you're not, then everybody just loves everybody, and we're just in some big hippie commune, right? No, we have to fight for heaven, right? And that's what this is all about. So, first things first, what is an institution? Because most of us are probably at least somehow affected or are postmodern, we know that when I use the word institution and you use the word institution, it may not be the same thing. So for some people, institutions relay some sort of historical presence. So you walk up and you see a university, that's an institution. That's an educational institution. I'm not talking about that kind of institution. I'm talking about, very similarly to what Pete has been talking about, the institutions that have fed into and the way in which we think about ourselves, the way in which we define ethics, the way in which we interact with those outside of our sphere, right? Those others. And so for me, an institution isn't just this historical element in which we just come into. It's something that we ourselves have actually had a hand in developing and creating. So what am I implicating us here? That we're all responsible for the kind of world, the kind of habits, the kind of racisms, the kind of ideologies that we have come up with. However, my part two of this argument is that we also have a way out. There is hope, right? And it's not that kind of hope that you can buy in a can and just drink it and feel good about it, right? It's the hope that you have to wrestle for. So, institutions, right? It's the things that develop, create, and mandate our allegiance to it, almost without question, right? And so what I want to do is class participation, right? You're all going to have to participate here, and if you don't, I will be the teacher who picks on you. So I'm going to show a couple videos. One is probably out of most of your genres. So, and I don't mean that as some sort of like knock or anything, but most of you might not have heard it unless you're a big BBC One fan or, radio, by the way, or you have YouTube on repeat every time. So, yes. So basically, what I'd like to do is actually open up with the kind of nature of ideology and the nature of institution and how it actually works on a level. So I might actually talk over this. This is a clip from the new Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with Johnny Depp, right? Someone who I mean, if I was a gay man, I would probably want to marry him. But I'm not. So he is just great. And you may hate this version, but I'm going to fast forward through about the first minute because it's literally all of them just walking towards meeting Willy Wonka, right? But what I want you to focus on is the actual, the little puppets, right? And so these puppets, they're just part of the mechanism, right? And the mechanism tells you what to desire, how to desire, where to go. And then I want you to pay attention really closely to what happens to these mechanized puppets, right? And then find your place in there. So not really, because I don't want to see anybody stop, drop, and rolling. And that'll make sense in a second. So if you could watch this just for a second.
Generosity, there is no way to contain it. To contain it, to contain, to contain, to contain. Oh, Willy Wonka is the one that you're about to meet. Willy Wonka is a genius who just can't be beat. The magician and the chocolate whiz, the best darn guy who ever lived. Willy Wonka, here he is.
Wasn't that just magnificent?
Yes, it was. Okay, so that's how ideology within the institutional and cultural biases works, right? We don't realize that we're a part of something, but we are also willing to defend the pain, no matter how much pain and loss is involved in our participation in the institutional bias, right? And don't worry, I'll give you more solid examples. But to ground ourselves in this institutional bias, and so that you are aware of what we're talking about when we use these terms, I'm going to challenge you now to listen to a video that's fairly new, right, by a singer that is basically dealing with a very particular westernized issue that in some places is becoming globalized. I'll give you a hint, it's about body image. But it's probably not maybe your taste, but let's just go with it, right? And this is also a test to see if you're really a radical theologian or if you are a Pentecostal hiding as a radical theologian. And if you are, you will be excommunicated immediately. So go ahead and watch this. I'm going to probably cut it off towards the end because she gets a bit, monotonous. But listen for the key words. If you don't, well, we'll walk through that together, hand in hand. All right, so this is called All About the Bass, right?
Because you know I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, bass. Yeah, it's pretty clear. I ain't no size 2, but I can shake it like I'm supposed to do. 'Cause I got that boom boom that all the boys chasing, all the right junk in all the right places. I see the magazines working out Photoshop. We know that shit ain't real. Come on now, make it stop. If you got beauty, just raise them up. 'Cause every inch of you is perfect from the bottom to the top. Yeah, my mama, she told me don't worry about your size. She says boys like a little more booty to hold at night. And no, I won't be no stick figure silicone Barbie doll. So if that's what you're into, then go ahead and move along. Because you know I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, Hey, I'm bringing booty back. Go ahead and tell them skinny bitches that. No, I'm just playing. I know y'all think you're fat, but I'm here to tell you every inch of you is perfect from the bottom to the top. Yeah, my mama, she told me don't worry about your size. Because you know I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass,
It's all about the bass. I have no idea why, but it's apparently all about the bass. Yeah, definitely a collector's item to have. So, what does this tell us? What does this teach us about institutional biases and the way in which it works, right? Now, she's in the West. She's obviously born in the West. She's an American, right? So, the very, very first thing that comes to mind, and please pipe in, is this notion of the perfect female. So really, we haven't moved on from Greco-Roman ideology, the drive to objectify women, right? And so in one sense, she's the caricature that is so prevalent in the world today. And I mean, I've had conversations with some of you about this very thing, right? About the necessity of being skinny, the necessity of being almost, Ethiopian, and the way in which one eats, the way in which one looks at oneself. That's why anorexia is such a huge issue still today, right? I have no idea. I love food too much. I would never want to throw it up. But the whole idea of this perfect female is seemingly a pervasive Western issue, right? And we can go throughout history and find periods where actually being overweight was actually more important and more prevalent, a sign of wealth, right? And so it's almost like we live in this kind of historical conundrum where we now live in an era where it's more important to be skinny, right? That's the prevalent attitude. So of course she's challenging it, but she's still under the same institutional bias and framework of, hey, that's a perfect female. So it still plays into the very idea of perfection, of wholeness. It doesn't deal with lack, right? It represses it, right? And so what's it repressing? It's repressing the fact that we're still objectifying women, right? So another one, right, is patriarchy. But why? Why patriarchy? Because you've already heard me use it once, twice, right? Because the whole image is her defending her image. But for who? Another element that she's actually defending without her realizing in terms of her institutional biases herself is the notion of heteronormativity, right? Because she says, because I got the boom boom that all the boys chase, right? She didn't say girls, she didn't say anybody else. So she's promoting the institutional bias of heteronormativity, right? And so that's why it's patriarchy, because it sets itself in this, well, you know what, this kind of Judeo-Christian model of, it's only correct if a male and female get married, right? And that's just with this one video, right? And if there's any other elements, please stop me, right? Yes?
One of the lines in the song was...
Yeah. I mean, it's basically based on that line that she actually keeps repeating over and over and over. Because I got that boom boom that all the boys chase.
The whole point about the mother is the mother is trying...
It still feeds the institutional bias, right? It feeds off of the dualistic interpretation, right? As long as you have this, right? You have Republican, you have Democrat, you have Tory, you have the conservatives, right? And so you feed, yeah. Hey, I did not confess any allegiance here. I'm just saying, right?
I get your point, but you could also see this as a rhetorical device.
Well, see, and I think that's probably what the institution wants you to think. I'm not there. Don't believe that I'm here, right? Repress me, right? And so and I'm a non-dualist, right? So, I mean, that's always going to play into this. And so I think we need to see the paradoxical relationship between the two, right? But I do get your point, is that, oh yeah, well, we could just be almost kind of the literal pragmatist, and well, she's just fighting, one side. But the problem is that she's fighting one side that actually gives the very parameters of what she should be arguing. Right? This is there's a massive right now infatuation with Russell Brand, right? The drug user, turned comedian, turned actor, turned everything, right? I mean, he's revolutionary now. There's massive infatuation with his rhetoric of revolution. Right, we need a revolution, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm all for revolution. Hell, I'm a communist, so obviously I want revolution, right? But the problem is that his language isn't any different than what he's countering. It's literally defined by what he's countering. And so Pete was talking about this at the end of his talk, was about imagination, right? Well, if we sit here and try to imagine what it would look like, doesn't that already set in motion the very parameters from which we should imagine and what we shouldn't be imagining? So this is why I even preface my talk with, like, we need to wrestle this out. This isn't me coming at you and saying, I'm right, you're wrong, you're stupid, I'm not. You know, all of this kind of dualistic thinking. It's saying we actually need to work out this shit together, because that's exactly, we're all in this together, aren't we? I mean, you kind of can't leave this room, right? That wasn't a threat. We don't have like a bomb waiting back there. So yeah, I mean, I do take your point, but I think there's something to be said for that. But at the same time, I think that we need to realize that we're all inside of our own institutional biases, right? Let me give you a personal example. I was adopted when I was at the age of 4 or 5, I don't remember. But mainly because my biological parents, they were drug dealers, professional drug dealers. And, you know, it's not really lucrative business, you know, unless, you know, you learn how to market well. And then it got so bad that my mom became a prostitute, right? We were just that low. It was just a really, really bad time for drug selling in the market business. And basically, we were all taken away, me and my 2 siblings. And I was adopted into basically a family where my mom was a Dutch Pentecostal, and I don't know if those two are supposed to go together. But my foster dad is Hispanic, straight from Mexico, was dropped off at the border at the age of 14. It's pretty much a westernized Hispanic, right? Then 3 of my siblings are African American, right? It was like having the United Nations in our living room. The whole thing was, and we keep talking about this over and over, me and my siblings and my family, is this realization that even though they're black, they still exude whiteness, right? Why? Because they're in America, which the not so much anymore, but for a long time, the predominant demographic was white, right? And so it's this realization that no matter what I do, I'm never going, I mean, I can take melanin pills and say, hello, I'm black, right? But that won't change anything, because I still will be exuding whiteness, right? Now there's a video, and I've actually found a way to plug it for tonight. There's a video that you have the option of watching tonight, right, called The Examined Life. And it includes a speaker by the name of Cornel West. I'm not sure, has anybody ever heard of Cornel West? Right, okay. So he's very well known in the States. He's very prominent, right? He's a philosopher, Christian philosopher. I use Christian very loosely, but and he probably would as well. But recently, with the Ferguson riots, which Pete stole, I'm just kidding. Is he actually went on his Facebook status update and he says, I'm going down to Ferguson to get arrested. So here's this prominent black man, right? Well known, you know, graduated and taught in Princeton. So why is he going down to just get arrested? Well, one, because he's fighting against the institutional bias, because there was a massive chasm in terms of some people saying, this isn't racism, it's just about power and economics, i.e. because it's just about the lower class, right? It's the lower class fighting against the cops, right? The bourgeoisie, all this kind of stuff. But here's an upper class guy who's quite rich, right? Quite affluent, and he goes down, and what happens? He gets arrested. Why? Because he wanted to show that it wasn't just an economic retaliation by the crowd, that it was a racist move by those in power, right? Yeah.
Did he do something illegal to get arrested, or did he get arrested simply because he was black?
He was picking on them, which actually, unless you were inciting a threat, right? they shouldn't have arrested him, but he got up in their face. But he didn't say, I want to beat you up, blah, blah, blah. It was only because the whole ideology of the police system there is, if I sense a threat, then that's probable cause for arresting you, right? Now, Cornel West is very aware of how the police system works there, right? But I think his main argument was that, listen, we are so entrenched in this that we can literally argue against it. And by arguing against it, we actually sustain it. And so ultimately what he's saying is we need a new we actually don't need institutions. Institutions are the most perverse form of mediation in terms of ideology. It's prepackaged, right? And that's why they're so attractive. We're like, oh yeah, I could step into this group and, I feel like I'm part of something because, it's the Progressive Christian Network and I'm never going to be ever invited back for saying what I'm about to say. But look at the predominant demographic in this room. Right? This is a major issue today, right? I mean, in 2001, the UK took a census, okay, on churchgoers. 96% were white. 7% were minority, and I know they're supposed to be 100%. So this goes to show you that we're still in it. That we can literally justify the pain we experience. Like, oh no, this is okay. You know what I mean? Like, we can experience the fighting. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to think of a more grounded example here. Is when we're go ahead. Well, and I think that's a great question. And this is a great moment of exposure because I, like Pete, am a big believer in exposing myself. Not naked, don't worry. Not that kind of gathering. I'd have to charge you anyways. Basically, the reason why I stumbled is because I'm very aware of the demographic. I'm very aware of the group, right? And that message is not a positive one. Because everybody equates with no institution with nihilism or a chaos. But where does God start with creation? With nothing, with the void, with a lack, right? So everybody's scared shitless because they're like, oh my gosh, if we have no institution, if we have no mediation, then where do we start? You can, but see, that's relying on two things. One, it's relying on duality, right, to define that. Like, i.e., no institution is institution. Because this is the one thing that, I've been in, philosophy for the last 5-7 years, or whatever, and that's one of the main arguments that keeps frustrating me, not because I think there's any value in it, I think it's stupid. Not that you are. Man, I'm never coming back. All right, is the duality of an inside and outside, which, again, that's what institution creates, right? It creates xenophobia. As soon as you join a church, you're not the other church, right? As soon as you create, anything. Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say the second part, but go ahead.
I'm still a bit confused. Could you give me a definition of what you class as an institution?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, no. Basically, an institution is something that is established, right? Something that has been established, right? So it's not just a belief system. It's something that includes a belief system. It's something that assumes a certain way of being, like this video. That's a Western presumption of how we see one another, i.e. females, or how we should see females, or how females should see themselves, right? And so in one sense, when I use the word institution, I'm also equating it with the idea of ideology, right? And ideology, as Marx uses it, as this point of false consciousness, right? As this point of us misrecognizing ourselves and our potential. Does that help?
A little bit, but I'm still going to be left confused by the fact that if you remove
I'm not here to give you answers. That's what this wrestling thing is for, right? That's what us talking this out is for. But to go back to what you were saying, and then I saw Andy's hand as well, is okay, so an institution, when I use the word, I'm not saying this building. I'm not saying we need to be terrorists towards actual brick and mortar. But we need to be very, very reticent to jump into things that we think look good, right? Like, oh yeah, let's go see Willy Wonka, you know what I mean? And let's see this whole thing, but actually underneath, it's really just burning up, right? And so I get what you're saying, is that eventually we will have communication. I'm not against communication, obviously. This is why I want this, right? So when I say institution, I'm inferring that there's something historicized, right? That there's something assumed, right? And that's what I'm saying. So for example, let me use another example, like cultural biases, right? A cultural bias would be a simple example of the assumption that when you read a book, everyone reads a book, right, from the left to the right. That's not true. You know what I mean? You go to Israel, that's the other way. You know what I mean? And so it's basically, when I use the word institution, I also equate it with the idea of assumptions. What are our preconceived assumptions about one another, right? And so yes, when I say we need liberation from those, I'm really saying we need liberation from our assumptions. But the problem is, and this is why, you know, in sociology, that's why they use the word institutions, is because over time, these ideologies, these ideas, they become like the brick and mortar, where we don't want to fight them, where when we receive persecution, and notice that that's always been a subjective term, right? That whenever we receive persecution, okay, that we simply justify it. Oh, it's because we're correct, right? It's because they're wrong. And so this is what I mean to entail when I use that word institution, is that there's always going to be an inside, there's always going to be an outside, right? Institutions are typically xenophobic. And I mean, to maybe even get one more class participation is to also have you guys work together. Pete's going to love this. As one of my favorite movies is The Dark Knight. And there's a conversation here. Now, I mean, the institutional biases are obviously going to be different from Meghan Trainor's song. But what I want you to do is listen. We might hang on, I'll have to start that one. And obviously it's Joker and Batman, right?
If we're going to play games, I'm going to need a cup of coffee.
The good cop, bad cop routine.
Not exactly.
Never start with the head. The victim gets all fuzzy. You can't feel the neck. See?
You wanted me. Here I am.
I wanted to see what you'd do. And you didn't disappoint. You let 5 people die. Then you let Dent take your place. Even to a guy like me, that's cold.
Where's Dent?
Those mob fools want you gone so they can get back to the way things were. But I know the truth. There's no going back. You've changed things. Forever.
And why do you want to kill me?
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to ripping off mob dealers? No, you complete me.
You're garbage. You kills for money.
Don't talk like one of them. You're not. Even if you'd like to be. To them, you're just a freak. Like me. They need you right now. When they don't, they'll cast you out. Like a leper. You see, their morals, their code. It's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other.
So, what do we got? What are our institutional biases that, as presented in this film clip? Anybody? Don't all jump at once. I think it also says something about the way in which we've come to define laws and how those laws have come to define what is bad and what is good, and then also how the law itself allows for vigilantes, but also keeps them in check. Notice it was actually Gary Oldham's character that had to be in the room first. And then Batman came in, right? So it's not just that the vigilante, as we've been taught to think, has this basically this presumption of power and he's always above the law, but that eventually the vigilante will be caught, right? And this is why you have this, and both of you are kind of alluding to this, is you have this kind of paradox of here's this supposed good guy who's actually helping the police. But then if you read the story of Batman, there are times where he's running from those who he's helping, right? And so it's this assumption of power, it's this assumption of law, right? And that we can only be lawful people if we have the law. It's actually a very depressed view of humanity. Because if we're always, and I'm going to talk about this at my talk later, is, if we're constantly always perpetuating the ideology of ethics, what's it saying about the people who have to follow the ethics? Right? That we're unethical, that we're literally just lumps of cow manure on the side of a hill. And I see a lot of that here in the UK when I'm driving. But that's the whole notion that we're dealing with, right? Is that institutional biases are here. They're right underneath our noses. The way in which we sit, the way in which we come and greet one another, right? The way in which we come and construct talks and have a podium and all of this, right? All of these things have a way of getting into us and grasping us. It's very much like the movie The Matrix. Anybody ever see The Matrix or very familiar with it? Right? Okay, all two of you. Is if you followed the trilogy, and I will try to, fast forward you through the whole thing, and, Neo is this kind of savior-esque person who's come to save the world from the machine, to basically create the world that we live in, which is an ultimate illusion. And at the end of the day, though, it's still the machines who win. Well, obviously not at the trilogy part of it, but it's the machines that are actually in control of the people. Does that make sense? And so that's what I'm trying to say here. That's what we need to rid ourselves of, this kind of machinic practice. And what I want to do is bring this back to church stuff, because I know it's Christian and we got to talk about that as well. But what I do want to talk about is how, in one sense, the kind of institutional ideology within the church is also psychosomatic, right? It involves our body, right, as well. So even outside of the church, to be ethical is not to steal, right? I can't just walk up and say, haha, there's my $5 free CD, right? So I just can't do that, right? Because it's been institutionalized. We're all institutionalized into thinking, well, that's awful, He should have his head slammed on a desk, right? And that's the kind of thing that justifies our activity, like you said. You know what I mean? If we create an enemy, which institutions will always need an enemy. They will always need somebody to hate, whether it's a good institution or bad, right? Christian Aid hates poverty, hates exclusion, right? Now, am I against Christian Aid? Not necessarily, right? But my whole point is that institutions will always need an enemy. We will always need to fight. We will always need to be against something, right? Now, is that right or wrong? That's for you to wrestle out, right? That's for you to actually discover. I'm not here to say yes or no, right? So, psychosomatic church practices, right? Institutional practices. So, not only do we have to believe in things in churches, you have to act them out, right? So, not only do you pray, but you have to kneel when you pray, right? No. I mean, now some of you probably don't come from all of those traditions, but the typical, again, institutionalized preconceived notions, right, is that, yes, you should, or you have to fold your hands, or you have to go into some sort of personal closet space, or you have to be in some sort of meditative state, right? In some way, shape, or form, it has to be personalized. That's what I'm trying to get at, right? And so, and sometimes you actually have this, or like worship. The typical preconceived notions, especially, and now I'm using America, like the mega churches, you know what I mean, where they gut out like a big Asda, and hey, this is a church now, right? And it's like basically capitalism 101. I mean, to me, Christianity today has become nothing more and nothing less than the religion of capitalism. Let me consume because it makes me feel happy, right? So, worship.
You seem to be putting up a lot of soapbox men so that we can shoot them down. When what do they belong to?
Okay, well, I mean, and I'm fine with that. I mean, but there's a history here, and that's my point. There's a history that we all belong to. And that history has informed the way in which we now are. So even though you may say that you're actually from a tradition that doesn't do that, I guarantee you follow your tradition all the way back. There was a time when it was. And whether you believe it or not, those traditions still inform your behavior of what you should and should not believe and how you should believe. Even the fact that I'm a leftist, philosophical materialist has to do with my upbringing. That's part of my institutional bias. Right?
Institutions also building creativity. There are wonderful moments of twist and changes, aren't there? It's much more fluid and wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm not against creativity. That's exactly what I'm for. That's exactly what I'm saying, and that's what the institutions don't do. The institutions define the parameters of what creativity you are allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And that's what I'm trying to say, right? Is that, yes, be creative, but be so creative it is outside the mind of the institution. And I mean that, the mind of the institution that thinks for us. Yes, and that's actually a great point, because I'm not against biases. I'm against the institutionalization and demonization, or even the exaltation of the bad biases. So what I'm saying is, yes, biases are, in one sense, they're so organic that they don't even hold a good or bad. My whole point is that through the institution, i.e. the mediation of the institution, right? Through the mediation, that's where you determine the parameters of whether they're good or bad. So please not hear me saying all institutional biases are bad. No. I'm saying that there are ones that we are so unaware of that we defend them, like racism, like xenophobia, like patriarchy. Some of those which are so prevalent, especially in the West. And I mean, I lived in India, and patriarchy is just all over the place, right? I mean, and that's one of their major institutional biases that's tied in with their religious way of life, right? So again, do not hear me saying or demonizing that all biases are bad. Yes, there are great ones, and I think the best ones are the ones that can actually converge with creativity, that can endorse it, that can encourage a positive space for this kind of wrestling, right? So that we can actually walk away and say, how do we change this? Because, I mean, that's the whole point of this talk, is to say, yes, there's ways to change this. So it isn't just saying, oh, well, yeah, we should just go blow up institutions, blah, blah, blah. Again, institutions, like I said, for me, are the way in which we have come to historically defend ideologies that aren't necessarily conducive to living together on planet Earth.
We don't have to say institutional bias is wrong. We just need to know that we're aware of it.
Yes, like, i.e., don't be unthinking. I mean, since we're talking about India, I'll bring a quick example up, and then it's almost lunchtime. I spent some time in India, like I said, and I was invited to go speak there, and it was at a time where I was just starting my deconstruction in my faith, and it was really interesting because I was invited by a very Pentecostal evangelical group to go and speak, and they didn't really vet my talks. I mean, they kind of looked it over just to translate, but they didn't really vet the content. And the basis of the content was, one, Christianity doesn't have all the answers. Two, women should be treated as equals, right? And again, remember, India is entrenched in patriarchy because of their religion. And so, I mean, I remember just sitting before a crowd of like 1,000 people, and it was really interesting because after my talk, all they wanted was someone to heal them, right? And they didn't care about what I just said. They just wanted someone to heal them, right? Because they're so entrenched, it's like, but you know what? I don't care. Yeah, I'm fine that we have patriarchy, and I'm not even necessarily against patriarchy. I'm saying, hey, let's make this a little bit more equal, right? And so for them, it was more that they were entrenched in their own religious ideology, which has been historicized, right, into their practices. So for them, there isn't room for creativity. And that's my main argument, right? We need to allow room for more creativity, even if it's seemingly against what we think we are supposed to be against. Does that make sense?
Upload anything, you just have to put up with the garbage that most people put onto it. Is that the only...
No, I mean, that's just as biased because because everybody has biases, whether it's trash. I mean, the fact that you even just labeled it trash, that's a bias. Well, and who gets to determine that, right? So that's my point. We're all in this. It's ideological. And the only way out is through it together, not with let's keep our own kingdoms, right? It's actually out together, if that makes sense. There was like 3 other hands up. Well, sorry. Yes?
You talk about churches on new fascism. I haven't heard anything about fascism. It's a very strong word.
Yes, no. And I mean, basically, because, again, the idea of fascism, of having this kind of power-laden nationalism where we say, okay, you know what, I like my group, right? So fascism is just a political form of xenophobia, right? Hitler was a xenophobe, right? So what we're dealing with is that when we basically create these ideological structures, right, where we defend the structure, and I'm talking about negative biases here, guys, right? Negative biases, then we create a system that defends those biases, and they even promote them as positive, right? And see, the church historically has had a hand in developing, and remember the words historically, right? Developing that same ideology. Okay, and we need to be aware of that no matter where we go, we're going to be trying to set up a church, even if we're atheists, right? We're going to be trying to set up something that promotes our ideology. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we need to be aware of the biases that we are walking into these institutions, whether historicized, whether historically bound, or whether new, whether organic. Lest we actually fall into the trap of saying, this is the way reality should be, and I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to actually make it so. Right? And that's the end goal for some of these institutional biases, right? Because it's saying, well, this is the way I believe we should actually adhere to rules within society because that's the way it should be. Now, I'm not saying that we need anarchy. I'm saying we need discussion. We need discourse. We need creativity. But we need to think outside of our own institutional biases. Well, no, I didn't say Christianity is racist. I said that there were periods of racism within Christianity. Christianity and Moors and... Well, hope I've given you something to talk about for lunch.